Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be, and welcome to today's webinar. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Microphones are muted, but you can go ahead and type your questions into the Q&A box or chat anytime. If we don't get to them during the conversation, we will definitely take time for Q&A at the end. My name is Samantha Winters, and I will be hosting the conversation today, which is about how access to cloud imaging can support you, whether working in the field or with referring vets, so you can maybe collaborate on a case. We're going to go over some of those scenarios, and I have our subject matter expert with me, Kai Rivera, who not only knows Purview Image inside and out, but Horos as well. And he can tell you a little bit about the other tools out there, the pros and cons. Thanks for joining, Kai.
Sure. Hey, thank you, Samantha, for giving me the opportunity to chat with the audience about this. I'm very passionate about these things, and I also am a pet owner. I have a little dog, Pikachu, so being able to talk about these types of things is very interesting.
Great. Now, I'm going to see if I can do this while talking. We have a few questions just to get a better sense of what the audience is already familiar with using. I'm going to see if it's going to let me simultaneously launch this poll. Okay, so that's launched. If you don't mind just answering those questions while we're talking, that'll just give Kai and I a sense for where everyone's kind of starting out. And while you're doing that, you might be wondering, how do Purview and Horos relate? So I'll give you a quick debrief on that. Purview is actually the chief sponsor of Horos, meaning that we maintain Horos for the community and ensure that people all around the world can continue to have access to downloading it, using it, accessing medical images for free. We can hardly believe it, but Horos turned 9 this year, has had over 1 million downloads in more than 186 countries, and is being used by researchers, medical experts, pharmaceutical industry, vets, educators, you name it. If you're a Horos user, just a friendly reminder, we always like to throw out there that Horos runs on donations only. So if you feel inspired to donate and keep it going, it's always appreciated. So let's get to the topic that everyone's here for, Kai. One question that I hear all the time is, what can I use Horos to do? What are its strengths? What are its limitations? Would you mind just giving us a quick breakdown of that?
Sure. Right. So first thing, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a veterinarian, not a radiologist, but I've worked with many of them around the world and gotten their feedback for the past couple of years. So I can speak to how the customers and users of Horos and Purview solve some of their problems. So one of the things that's interesting is that with Horos, the problem that it solves is I need to review medical images of my clients, of their pets, whether it's a small dog or perhaps it's a large racehorse, right? And they need to have a way to view those the medical images, whether they're X-rays, radiographs, or perhaps larger, more complex scans such as MRI, CT, ultrasounds, things like that. And depending on where you are, whether you're at the practice or in the stable scanning the patient, you might need to bring those images over to a dedicated workstation to be able to view those images in diagnostic quality on on a screen, right? And so a tool like Horos is open source, it's free, which means that it's been used by hundreds of thousands of users around the world who are looking to review those images right from their computer, whether it's a Mac laptop, like a MacBook Air, or perhaps even the iMac, which is actually a desktop, right? When you need to look at those images, you should be able to use certain tools, and so Horos is able to provide things like multiplanar reconstruction to be able to have some of these advanced views that's helpful in the diagnostic process. And one of the things is that since these workstations are usually a desktop at an office, you might need to bring the files of the scans over to that machine. So whether it's on a thumb drive or a CD, you might have to physically bring the scans over to the machine. And so what it's really great for is one, it's free, it's easy to install, and it has a great a community online where people can talk about how they use it and things like that. One of the difficult things about it is that just a since it's a program that's installed on your computer, you'll actually need to have those files with you. And so as you can see on the other side of the screen, what's it not so great for? It is limited to Mac. So programs like Horos and Osiris, which are essentially sister programs, they're only on Macs. And so for our Windows friends, they might use other free software or perhaps even paid software to view those medical images. One of the things that I mentioned about mobility, or perhaps the lack of mobility, is that when you are let's say at the stable scanning a horse, and you'll need to take those images over to a workstation to take a look at the images. But what happens when you go home? What happens if you have a consultant who's across the city or across the state or across the world who needs to look at your scans? We have some customers down under in Australia. We actually did a user story about Racing Victoria, where they need to take scans of horses before the racing events and get them reviewed by the consultants and the radiologists who might happen to be, in California or somewhere else across the planet. And so being able to give access to the images to people worldwide is increasingly challenging when you have just a local software. And so as you can see on the bottom part, sharing and perhaps even storage and recovery of these scans is important as we go into this, cloud-based working environment. So as for the viewers of the screen, you can see a couple of icons showed up. There are other tools that are there on the market to help make accessing these files available. Things like Purview Image, things like Purview Light. Perhaps some of the attendants of this webinar may have heard of Horos reporting and sharing, or perhaps you are a Osiris user that's looking for some of these cloud-based solutions and you came across Purview during that process. So to recap, Horos is great for when you need to look at scans and you have the files available to look at them on your computer. You can use powerful tools, 3D, multiplanar reconstruction. You can do some reporting on that local machine, but where it starts to create some gaps is that when you need to look at these images from different facilities, or perhaps get these images to somebody else who's in a disparate location, or perhaps deliver something like a radiology report over to them, when you have to log into different systems and things like that, it creates a little bit of a cumbersome process to manage all those things. And what we're trying to do in this webinar is to educate some of our attendees on how there are some things on the market that can help make these images more available.
That's really great, Kai. Thank you. Thanks for that breakdown. Okay, so let's talk about some of those other things that are maybe used for parts of the process, but maybe not the entire process.
Sure.
So the pain points that we typically hear when you're thinking of the functions that are trying to be accomplished by our vets are having central access to medical images from wherever you are, which you've already touched on. Maybe you want all of your modalities to upload into one central location. Maybe you want to be able to view on whatever device, your iPad, while you're working in the field, or even pull something up on your cell phone. Or maybe you work from home sometimes, that they want to be able to easily report and easily share those reports and images back to the referring vet or pet parent. So let's go into all of those different tools and ways that's happening. We touched on it a little, but we didn't go deeply into what's being used right now, what the benefits of those things are, and what the trade-offs might be.
Yep. Yeah. So one of the problems that Horos can solve is storage. It's, how do I manage all of these scans that I have, whether it's I got them on a CD from the referring vet, or perhaps the pet owner. So you can see on the screen here, there are a couple of different ways that people might manage the amount of files that they have, whether it's a box full of CDs in their closet, or perhaps they just store the scans on their local computer or hard drive. Sometimes more IT savvy firms will have like a local network that they can pull from different computers on a shared network like that. Some facilities might have a PACS, picture archiving and communication system, which essentially is a server that will store the scans and make them available for viewing or sharing. And a lot of that architecture, a lot of the computer parts are just on premise, right? Which is why they call it that. And we have started to see some facilities that use things like Dropbox or perhaps Google, other cloud platforms to be able to store some of these scans online, since some of the more advanced scans, larger scans can be, closer to, 500 megabytes or a gigabyte. These are pretty large files. And when you start to scan a lot of patients, if you're just simply storing them on your local machine, it can take up space and slow down your computer's performance. So we've started to see them offload into the cloud. And of course, we have Purview Image, where many of our users around the world will store their scans in a central database and be able to access them from wherever they are.
Great.
Yep.
Let's get into
For viewing. Yeah. So now that you have the scans stored somewhere, one of the things that you need to do during the process is be able to look at them, right? And so for many of our Horos users, they'll simply have the scan perhaps loaded on their computer, open up the image on Horos, take a look at them, and then do their interpretations and perhaps make a report. Some of the other options that you'll see here would be other software programs, so things like Osiris, which is also on Mac, Radiant, which is another, I believe it's a paid viewer that's available on Windows machines. And there are some other options such as Horos Mobile, which allows you to view scans on your iPad and perhaps take it over to the pet parent and show them in the waiting room or something like that, or the some sort of room where you can consult with the patient or their parent one-on-one. And then even a Purview Image allows you to view these scans on any operating system. So whether it's Windows, Mac, or even a mobile device.
Great.
Going along in the process, after scans are viewed, typically there is a report associated with it. And so many of our clients, if they're scanning the patients, they might have a radiologist that could be remote or could be and part of their facility, or perhaps they're consulting with someone else to provide reads for them. So we also have another client, Inside Information Radiology over in Colorado, where they are the specialty veterinary radiologists, where we have hundreds of local primary vets that scan animals and then have those scans sent over to a central cloud for Inside Information Radiology, where the radiologist will log in, use the web-based viewer on Purview to read and then create reports. If that didn't happen, perhaps in another workflow, facilities might be taking scans, viewing them in Horos, and then have to open up something like Word or Apple Pages, dictate their findings into the report, save it into a PDF, and then they have to deliver it somehow. And so the next column there is sharing, right? So once you have the medical images and perhaps the completed report, what we've seen other clients do is perhaps just attach the PDF report into an email, and then if somebody wants to look at the images, they might be shared a link to the Dropbox of that file, right? Sometimes we've also seen, text messages of perhaps JPEGs or screenshots of the viewer. But what we found is that when dealing with medical images, DICOM is king, right? DICOM is the file that's used for, it's the standard for all these medical imaging procedures. And so if you're looking at medical images and you're looking at a screenshot or a JPEG, it's not going to be diagnostic quality, and it's tough to create informed decisions based off of something like that. So to recap that particular process, storage, viewing, reporting, sharing. If you are using, just Horos to store and view, you might also be using other programs to create the reports and then get those information over to someone else, which can make your process a little bit less efficient because you are jumping from platform to platform to platform. And you're also managing different logins and different things like that. And so I think the next section talks about some of the disadvantages to simply just using Horos in that process, which we can talk about.
That's one of the common threads that I picked up, and I just thought of this with Dropbox. So Dropbox, you can't view a DICOM image, right? It's
Right.
just
Yeah. It'll give you a way to download it, but then if you don't have a medical image viewer to open it, you're just getting a file which won't be usable, right?
right. So you're hoping that whoever you're sending it to also has something to read that DICOM image if you're sharing it from Dropbox, for example.
Right, exactly. And it's if they are users of Horos, if the recipient is a user of Horos, maybe they could just pop it in and open. But sometimes, you know, the pet parent won't have often have a medical image viewer, right? These are very specialized tools and programs. The way I think about it is kind of like Google Excel, the spreadsheet software, and Google Sheets, right? With Google Sheets, you can simply load your spreadsheet onto there and send it to someone else, and they can see what's happening. They might not be able to use all the pivot tables and things like that, but they can at least see the numbers and make some decisions. Similarly, with Horos and a medical image viewer, if you just send them the spreadsheet and the person doesn't have a way to view it or open it, it's not useful to them. They'll just get a file that takes up space on their computer.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about some of the pros and cons here.
Sure. Yeah, so this picture is actually interesting. So the risk of disaster or backup and recovery, these are all things that are pretty important, considering that we're dealing with patient medical information. And so this picture is actually from one of our customers over in Canada. So AgWest, they were in the I believe, if I remember correctly, in the Vancouver area, and they suffered a series of rainstorms that led to a flooding of a valley nearby. And if you see closely enough, there is I believe there is a technician or somebody on a jet ski pulling a cow through the flooded, area, and
Remember
it's
when
all the
this
way.
Yeah, this was like the 100 Years flood or something, and it, um, really caused a lot of damage to a huge area, right?
Right. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because when you think about sometimes in contracts they have the thing like a act of God or like force majeure or something like that. And this is probably one of those situations where you don't really plan for a storm that destroys, a lot of people's property and homes and businesses and things like that. But if you imagine if you were simply storing all of your patient's medical records in a shoebox, for example, or on the computers at the site, when the water washes away all of your files and you're on the hook, for those medical records, it can be, very tough, financially, obviously, because the operations of the business are now halted, but also, you were not able to retain those medical records for those patients, and it just makes things a lot harder. So, fortunately for AgWest, they had their scans in Purview, and so uh, although they had lots of physical damage to their files that were on site, they had backup of everything in the cloud on our servers, which are safe from those particular natural that particular natural disaster event. And so they were able to continue operations with as little speed bumps as you can from enduring something like that.
Yeah, this was a really incredible story.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely share this back with the audience at the end if they're interested.
Yeah. One of the things that I mentioned there, when you're on a desktop using something like Horos or Cyrix or Radiant, you might be able to use those strong tools. So as I mentioned, in Excel, you can use the pivot tables and all these different types of functions. In similarly in Horos, you might be able to do uh, a lot of strong viewing tools that take up a lot of CPU, and you're just drawing from the local computer power. When you're on the cloud, you're streaming from a website, so there is some variability in bandwidth and in computer processing. And so if you have if you're viewing the images locally, you might have the advantage to be able to use special tools to manipulate the medical images, but you are tied to that specific location. So if you're a surgeon, or perhaps you are limited to where you can work. Sometimes you might have to go in early on the weekends or throughout the week to be able to look at those scans, and it would be a lot more convenient and perhaps helpful. What we have found is that it has been helpful to our customers that have access to the cloud to be able to view medical images on a diagnostic quality viewer that happens to be on the web, such as Purview Image, that allows them to more easily balance, commuting into the city or out of the city to view these scans, and perhaps view them from their home office while being able to spend time with their friends and family, and keep some of that time for them.
Great.
Yeah, disparate systems. As I mentioned, if you are using just Horos for viewing and storage, you might be logging into something else to report. You might have a word processing software in addition to a dictation program and a specific mic. If you're on a Mac, you might have to use certain tools. If you're on Windows, it might not be compatible with the things you're using for the Mac. Uh, and for central organization, right? The whole theme is if you can use our argument is that if you can use the cloud and take advantage of that, your business will improve, your process will improve, you can help more patients, serve more patients, and be able to get increased revenue from that. And so when you're using disparate systems, you're taking time, which is valuable, and as we know and as we say, time is money. So the less time you can spend on jumping through these different systems, the more patients you can treat, and the more your practice can grow. Yeah, and here's some good points here. So as we mentioned, DICOM files are the gold standard in medical imaging, and as I mentioned, these files can be pretty large. If you have an MR that's 360 images or so, you're not really going to be able to email that because the services can't handle that. You might be able to send a couple screenshots, but for scans that have many images, you're missing the whole picture unless you see the scan in continuity. And so being able to not being able to share, it creates some problems if you're just using an email service. But also once you send that email, it could get lost in somebody's inbox. You don't have as much visibility on what they actually did with it. You don't know if they downloaded it. You don't know if they were able to view it as well. And so being able to facilitate the collaboration and sharing of these important medical imaging files and the case for the patient has been important to us. And so I would say that with Horos only, it's difficult to make this happen. You might have to use something like Dropbox, but with our customers that use Purview Image, the ability to share the files and the reports through an electronic web link, even create users to grant access to referring vets to come into the system, right? Being able to grant access to these scans is just as valuable as being able to view them wherever you need to.
Yeah. And I was just talking to a vet teleradiologist this morning who was expressing the pain point of needing to share with their referring vets that they're working with. But they didn't want to just share one image. They wanted to give them a filtered view so they could view the images that they regularly were
Right.
referring. You could see the reports and the
Yes.
process where they were. I know you're going to show us that in a minute, but do you mind just explaining, I guess, a quick, the benefit of being able to do that?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that we found is that when you can increase, access to other, veterinarians or other people in the process, you reduce the amount of turnaround time if you do it electronically versus, sending, physical discs, right? And so what we found is that you not only save on time because you can get a link to somebody immediately or grant access to them, but you also save on material and even some human resources, right? And so if you are let's say a veterinary imaging center and you're burning CDs and you have to mail them out to to anybody, or you have to give it to the pet parent schedules an appointment with the specialist, let's say, and they forget to bring the CD to the appointment, it just adds a lot of variables and can add some roadblocks, let's say, right? So what we have found is that for imaging centers, veterinary specialists, consultant radiologists, and perhaps even owners, trainers, anybody who's involved in the process, the faster we can make those images and other diagnostic records available to them, the faster the patient can get the care that they need. And we can also give a couple of lane lines, right? To use a bowling, analogy, right? We can help everybody in the process just kind of stay in the bounds of what they need to do. We can get the images from A to B in moments. We can also make the files available in diagnostic quality. We can also allow outside users to get access to only the scans that they referred in order to maintain patient privacy. And so the whole process of storing, viewing, reporting, sharing has been, tweaked and improved and made easier through something like Purview Image, whereby you can store the scans in the cloud, view them in diagnostic quality on any device, whether it's Windows or Mac. in addition to keeping the staff in one system to be able to save a little bit of time. And then
Right.
once the final output of that process, a radiology report is done, it can be sent over to the owner, back to the referring veterinarian, to anybody else who's involved in that process in moments, and they can view it wherever they happen to be. So worldwide collaboration, citywide collaboration, pretty soon in the future, intergalactic collaboration will be possible through something like Purview.
Yeah, and I would just add that the comment that I often hear, like with, I think we were before this talking about veterinary specialist Ireland, who uses the system in this way that we were just talking about. They really see a growth in referrals when we're able to make the process seamless and easy. Those referring vets want to work with you again and again. So,
Right.
okay. I know you're about to give us a quick how it works walkthrough, but if you don't
Yep.
mind, I feel like we kind of already recapped this, but you could give us a
Sure.
quick recap on Horos first Purview image.
Yeah. So if you're hopping on the webinar, now, or perhaps if you're looking through this at a later time, here's the recap, right? Horos on the left. We followed the DICOM standard, and it only works on Mac. If you're using Horos, you have to have the images on your local machine, and perhaps you can use it to send and receive files over DICOM protocol. On Purview image on the right, we do all of that plus being able to allow the viewing of medical images in diagnostic quality on a web-based browser, which allows it to be done on Windows, Mac, or mobile devices, right? Users can gain access from any device, as we mentioned, whether you're a specialist, whether you're the trainer or the owner or the person making the images, you can access them from wherever you happen to be and share access so that the recipient can view them wherever they are. In terms of uploading and sending scans, since it is a cloud PACS server, we can receive the images straight from the imaging scanner, so the X-ray can send directly over to the cloud if needed. But even further from that, when it's in the Purview cloud, you can even send it over to somebody else over to their PACS server so that they can review it in their own system. And so being able to make that process of sharing and receiving a little easier from any device is what we're all about here.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Do you mind just giving us a quick walkthrough of what it actually looks like and how it could
Sure.
work? Okay.
Yeah,
I'll
so let me,
screen and let you share your screen.
yep. Okay, so you should be able to see my Purview study browser, can you?
Yes.
Yep. All right. So when scans are uploaded to the central PACS, right? This is where storage is, right? You can see scans with patient name, the type of procedure it was, in addition to other fields such as the referring physician, the institution that it was scanned at. There are a couple of other tools here that might help in a radiology workflow, such as assigning a radiologist to a particular scan, in addition to adjusting the time sensitivity of a particular scan. And so when we go through the process of storing the scans, viewing the scans, reporting, and sharing, it's all on one platform in Purview image. So if you're going from Horos and investigating something like a cloud in order to save storage on your machine or increase referrals, here's how it would look like. You can find the scans, search them based off of patient ID or something. So let's look for a pet here like Lassie. Here's a dog MRI of the head. It's got a couple of images, 362. What might happen is if you want to view them on the web, you can simply click the eyeball and view them online. Or if you prefer to pull them back down into Horos or Osiris, you can simply click this button and it'll go. So let's say first I want to take a look at the images online. Keep in mind that I'm not a radiologist. So our viewer is able to handle the advanced imaging of MRs and CTs, in addition to, of course, things like radiographs. And so being able to view the scans, just on my laptop, and being able to see the advanced views like this is we found it to be very convenient, right? Let's say I've the radiologist has reviewed the scans online, and perhaps if they're even in a resident workflow where other people need to create study notes after reviewing the scans, you can type in some information here.
While you're showing that, Kai, I'll just
Yep.
remind our audience, if you have questions that pop up as Kai is sharing, whether it's, something we've already shared or what he's sharing now, please feel free to go ahead and put them in the Q&A. Now would be a good time for us to start collecting those. We'll either get to them during or after.
And so once let's say a resident has created the study notes, then the radiologist can log into the platform and do some of the reporting, right? So you click report, and it allows you to now stay on the web and create a templated or use templates to create your report. So it'll have your institution's address, it'll have your logo, could have your phone number there, MRI of the brain. Here's some information that's auto-populated for the report. On the side, you'll actually see some of the details that the technician has asked. So here are the breed details. Let me put that into the report. I click one button and it's there. I can also add multiple signatures digitally so that it'll have a nice e-signature there. And if I had key images or regions of interest that I want to highlight in the report, I can simply drag and drop the images there. And once I preview the report, it'll be a nice PDF style report that I can then email to someone else. So let's say I'll finish this report. Then it'll have the timestamp that it was created, and then I'll be able to actually go back to the browser here and go to reported cases. So we also help to manage that workflow of cases that are needing to be reviewed and cases that have been reported. So now I can see Lassie, that MR scan has now been completed. In order to help make it easier to collaborate and get this information to where it needs to go, I simply click the share button, and I'm able to share this medical record and include the study report over to the recipient. I can configure some of the security options like requiring name or date of birth. I can allow the recipient to download the images in DICOM format, which will allow them to have a copy of the images in medical grade quality. And I can also set an expiration time to protect that record. I can share this particular study with multiple addresses if needed. And I can also create a custom subject. So I can say case 362 for Lassie, and I say
When you share this report with the other person, so say it's the pet parent or similar, and they don't have a viewer, how do they receive that, and how do they then get to view it since they don't?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let's say I'm the radiologist, or perhaps even an administrator that's just delivering the report. Once I share this to an email address, when I click confirm send, there'll be a little button that says it was shared successfully. What I'm going to do is on my other screen, pull up the email and then bring it over to my screen. I'll show you what that experience is like. So here you should be able to see the email that was just sent to me. It says case 362 for Lassie. A medical image has been shared with you by client name. Please see the radiology report for this patient. Please call this number if you have any questions. So if I'm the pet parent or if I'm the referring physician, I might be on vacation or might be somewhere in the world. If I simply click access records, I should be able to open the Purview page and be able to click a button to view the images in the same viewer that the radiologist used to look at the scans, the medical grade viewer, in addition to being able to launch the report in the same format that we just saw. So the problem that we're solving is that when scans are reviewed and reported and shared, we want it to all be in a seamless process for the person doing that, but also for the recipient. So I simply went into my email, clicked access records and was able to have a link to immediately look at the report and see what's happening with my pet. But also, if I need to, if I'm the referring veterinarian, for example, I can open the images online in the same viewer, perhaps, that my specialist took a look at. And so we're promoting accessibility of these images in diagnostic quality, in addition to making the records, such as the report, available on any device. And what we found is that, like I mentioned earlier, it just decreases the turnaround time, increases communication, and typically what we found is that it's actually um, a very straightforward process for the person doing it. And then the person who receives it enjoys it so much that they begin referring more. They say, oh, I love referring to this doc because they just emailed me the report and the images and we're done, right? They do it in 48 hours or however much time it takes, and it's just a lot faster. And so users who have adopted something like the cloud see an increase in referrals, which eventually leads to increase in business and helping more patients.
So one question on this process, what if I, as the specialist, I want to explain the image to my client, maybe over the phone or in real time? Is there a way to do that?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good point. So let's say in this example, Kai, I am the referring veterinarian, or I'm the primary vet, and you, Samantha, are the pet owner, right? At this point, I've sent over the scan to another doctor who's in, Hawaii, for example. They did the report on Purview image, sent it over to me, and then now we have our appointment. In this scenario, I can read through the report. I can tell you what the specialist found, and in order to help make that process a little bit more visual, right, I can launch the viewer. And actually, what I can also do is I can forward this email over to you, the pet owner. You can click access records and open the images on your own screen, right? So let's say Samantha, the pet owner, opens the screen, and Kai, the veterinarian, also opens the screen. I can simply click the share this session button. And what it does is it allows both of us to interact with the image at the same time. So if I click this button when I'm opening it and you click this button at the same time, then our screens will mirror each other, and every movement that I make will be reflected on your screen. So I can say, for Miss Winters, for your patient Lassie, the veterinarian saw that this was happening, and you'll see it happening on your particular screen. And so being able to kind of screen share has been very helpful to our patients, especially if the owners or the consultants are in remote locations.
Okay, great. And I know we're about to jump to questions, but I have a couple starter questions for you that I all the time while you're in the viewer. Can you show us how you can change your screen? I know everyone's particular in, I guess,
Sure.
how doing studies, how their screen presents. How do you do that?
Right. So for those who have used medical image viewers before, this might be familiar to you. But for those who might just be watching, if they're administrators or perhaps other people involved in the vet process, sometimes the consultant or the veterinarian wants to see the images in a certain way. So right now it's 2x2, so you can see 4 particular what we call series of images. So here's a certain section of the patient. Here's another section. We have a hanging protocols adjuster that allows you to essentially choose which. Going through a little bit technical. Is it showing up your screen with a strange?
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm wondering. Let me see if I can refresh this.
Because we're on Zoom. But...
Here we go. I can adjust I can adjust which series is highlighted on my screen. So if I wanted to enlarge one of this particular series, I can make them larger here. And if I want to look at another view, I can simply switch to a different one and being able to see it here.
And you can move to a second screen, like a second monitor as well, right?
Correct. Yeah. So many of our doctors and users have multiple screens, and so this should support that as well.
Okay. Now, did you talk about annotating the image yet?
Well, let's see. So when we're talking about during the collaboration process, I mentioned that the vet, can click, and something like the arrow tool and say, here's what's going on. We know the doctor noticed that this particular area has this ailment, and we can also use various markup tools to be able to add,
Yeah, great. And then one other thing that popped up that made me think while you were sharing the process of getting the email and then going and accessing the image, we have our logo, but we can white label it for clients, right? So their brand would pop up for the client,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's a good question. And so in our demonstration system, you can see that there's the title of where it came from, Purview Sales Demo, in addition to the Purview image logo here. We can customize the email and even the portal so that when you log in, it'll have your logo. The URL will have your branding on it. And so clientname.purview.net. The email will have the business name here in addition to the logo. So um, when the recipient of the email gets it, they'll say, "Oh, a record has been shared with me by Dr. Rivera," right? And so they'll be able to see and have that brand information there.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts while we're waiting for questions from our audience? And again, last call for any questions if you all want to put them in the Q&A box while Kai's wrapping up. Anything that you didn't show us yet that I didn't think of? I do have one more question, if not.
Sure. I would say that in terms of customer support from Purview, right? There's a little button here that you can click and get a hold of the team. All you need to do is write your name and email address, and our team typically responds within 5 minutes. And if you pick up the phone and call us, there's usually a live person that you can speak to. And so we don't just provide the electronic access to the records, but we also provide the service of supporting you and your customers. And even if here's actually something pretty interesting. If you are a specialist and you want to get images from somebody else, you can actually create a link, an uploader link here, that you can send in an email or text that allows somebody to remotely upload images right to your cloud. And
Yeah.
so if you want to increase your business and you have a couple of clients that, have scans on CDs or thumb drives or things like that, or perhaps the pet parent, they can just drag and drop upload. And then when you log into your system, they'll be available right here.
Right. That's great. Or even referring vets you can just send it to them and they can drag and drop.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Fantastic. Okay. So my last question is, I know in the poll, a couple answered that they do work in the field. And sometimes I've heard questions pop up like, can I run this on my cell signal? Or, what are the requirements when you're out in the field? Obviously, if you have no Wi-Fi or no internet signal, that's
Right.
not you. But how does that work?
Yeah. So if I understand the question correctly, what are the requirements to be able to use Purview or something like Purview? Well, it works on regular cell phone 4G, 3G, LTE. And so if I were to open this, if I were to share this link to me or share it to somebody else who happens to be out in the field or something, they can open this link, let's say from their email address, right from from my iPhone. I can click access records. And when I click review images, it pops up just right on my phone on regular signal. And so for technicians and trainers and things like that who are out in the field, taking care of the horse, let's say at the stable or something like that, and they need to look at the scan when they're next to the patient or perhaps next to the pet owner, they should be able to just open it up on a regular cellular signal and view these large images still in diagnostic quality and see the annotations that the specialist had put on them.
Right. Great. And I've heard that from our development team that they don't it won't like time out if you have a low. So if you just have like 2 bars and you're out in the field, it'll just load more slowly, but eventually, it will load the whole thing, right?
Yeah, so my understanding is that, even if if you're out in the country, working with the horses or something like that, as long as you can open the page, it might take a little while to launch and show the scans, but you'll still be able to just with enough time, a couple of minutes or so, being able to view these. And we found that, even in in United States where internet's, pretty good, and other parts of the world, right? We know we have customers on, 6 continents, and we're working on, conquering Antarctica soon. You can be able to view images from wherever you happen to be. And so what we found is that even with the best, fiber connection, it helps. But even with a cell phone connection, 3G, you should still be able to use, these services.
Yeah, and that was example was like with one bar, but I've heard that with a regular cell phone signal, it's no
Yep,
problem. So,
correct.
okay,
Yep.
we have one question in. How would you recommend sharing JPEG images? I've heard that they can be attached, right? Is that how you would do it?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so that's a good question. So, in the presentation and in the demo, we talked about DICOM. What I would say is that for many of our clients, they might have received screenshots or pictures of, a medical image viewer, right? And so somebody might take a picture of the screen and then send it over in an email and say, hey, this is what, the doctor saw, or something like that, right? Purview can handle what we call, non-DICOM attachments, which essentially are other files that might be relevant to the case, things like JPEG, PDF documents, even video files, right? And so some of our customers and users have, they've generated movie files of these particular scans, and they want to make them available in the case. So there's a little paperclip icon, just like you have in your email. You click it, and then you can attach files to the case, making them available for, internal review. But what we deliver with the share is essentially the polished, report and the images. So what we typically have is the internal, documents and things like that. For human medicine might be things like prescriptions or referral documents, or sometimes screenshots of something. Those are attached to the case to make it easier for the radiologist or person to review the case holistically. And then what we help them deliver, is access to the completed report and the images, as those are the most used and most valuable from what we found parts of the process. So long story short, we can handle the JPEG. You can just simply use the paperclip to attach it.
Yeah, great. And if you don't have a DICOM image, you would create a blank study in that case, right? Is that how that would, you don't have to show me, but just.
Yep. You can create line items in the viewer to be able to add files to these studies.
I
Yep.
can't think of a scenario right now where that
Sure.
would be, but just to, add that to the end.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I think that's pretty good. I think that wraps us up for today. Kai, thank you so much for joining and sharing all these great nuggets of knowledge with us. And thank you to our audience for joining. I'm going to share my screen one last time and wrap up with a couple resources to close for our audience. So if you're wondering what's next, stay tuned to your email or to the Horos website or Purview website for follow-up and extra resources. We will send the recording out in case you want to watch this over and over again. Just a reminder that you can follow Horos on Instagram, GitHub, or Google Groups. That's actually a great place to go if you ever need to troubleshoot or are trying to figure out how to use part of Horos. You can also follow Purview's channel on YouTube, where we often share how-to videos, tips, and webinars like this one. So please feel free to follow us. We hope you do. And thanks again for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.